we said earlier, my name is Amanda Peters. I'm with Land Conservation. I'm the agronomist for the county. I'm going to be talking about testing. Did you turn it off?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Do I still need to wear the microphone?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Like I said, I'm going to be talking about Title 17 in our county ordinances. This is the land conservation chapter, and there's a couple of different sections in here that would apply to farmers in the county. The first one that we're going to be talking about is Chapter 1703. There we go. It's the soil and water conservation requirements for the farmland preservation program. For those that don't know what the farmland preservation program is it's a tax credit incentive that farmers can get if their land is located in certain areas of the state. It's a Department of Ag program that we administer at the county level. So this ordinance actually, all it does is it mirrors the state rules for running the farmland preservation program. Basically, it only applies to people that are zoned agricultural preservation or people that have a signed farmland preservation agreement in the Golden Triangle Ag Enterprise area. So this is a map of the areas in the county that would be affected by this ordinance. Anything in blue is zoned ag preservation, and then anything in the hashed area would be that Golden Triangle AEA. Now, just because land is included in one of these two areas does not mean that that landowner is participating in the program. So this ordinance only applies to those participating in farmland preservation in these areas. If that all makes sense.
I got a question.
Yeah.
At some time here in the future, before we get done with this, we're going to work on incorporating NR 151 into the county code.
Mm-hmm.
Will that change things the way this is presented as to who falls under those jurisdictions?
No, that shouldn't. Well, yes, it would. It would broaden the scope. Right now, this is, like I said, currently only in zone townships, and then it's even further broken down, only those with that AP zoning or in the Golden Triangle. If in the future NR 151 was incorporated into county ordinance, I'm assuming that we would have it so that it applies to the entire unincorporated area of Eau Claire County.
Does everybody know what the Golden Triangle is?
Probably not, but I didn't know. I didn't know if it paid to get into the nitty-gritty details. Basically, it's a special area that has been designated in Eau Claire County of farming importance. So in our Golden Triangle, that's an area, heavy ag use, lots of cash cropping, and dairy is important in that part of the county. It allows you to sign agreements for the farmland preservation program, even if you're not zoned ag preservation. So we have some parcels over here in Bridge Creek that decided to be in the Golden Triangle. Even though they don't have that AP zoning, they can still participate in farmland preservation through the Golden Triangle. That work? Okay. Okay, so what our Chapter 1703 basically says is that in order to participate in farmland preservation, the landowner needs to follow NR 151. This is exactly what the state statutes say. I am not going to get into NR 151 in great detail at this time. Greg will go over it a little bit more in depth later on. But basically, there are cropland practices and livestock practices that you need to meet. Some of the livestock practices are then also broken down into manure management, prohibitions, clean water diversions, manure storage facilities, and then how you handle your processed wastewater, like from a dairy facility or something like that. So just basically You need to meet those rules, those state rules, to participate in farmland preservation. It also sets kind of some administration rules, what us as staff will do. It's our job to meet with the farmers one-on-one to determine if they are meeting NR 151, and therefore if they are in compliance with farmland preservation program. Once a landowner is compliant and participating in the program, then they submit an annual self-certification to our office, basically saying on an annual basis that they're continuing to be in compliance with Farm Pres. And then it's up to us as staff to do random spot checks. Basically, we go out to the farm and review NR 151 with those landowners. Our ordinance says once every 6 years. The state says once every 4 years. So that is one difference in our ordinance from what state says. There's also an outline for a schedule of compliance. So if someone is not meeting the current state standards, we can give them a 3-year timeline and kind of a game plan in that 3 years of what they will do to come into compliance. Or we also have the authority to issue a notice of non-compliance. And basically what that means is that's, you know, the official certificate that they are not meeting these conservation standards, therefore they cannot claim the farmland preservation credit anymore. Other than the notice of non-compliance, there's really no other what am I trying to say? There's no other penalties after that. Just stop claiming the tax credit. Okay, I'm doing these really brief, broad overview. So I'm done with the farmland preservation side of things. Does anyone have any more questions before I move on?
I've got
Yep.
something to add regarding NR 151. If I'm not mistaken, technically it applies to all farms. It's just that you can't be compelled or forced or enforced on unless you're capable, and DNR does it, unless you're in farmland preservation, in which case you agree to it, and a few other programs that I think you're going to go into, but technically everybody is supposed to comply with it. Correct. And I was going to cover that a little bit later. Okay. Yes.
Getting ahead of us here. All right, if there's no other questions about 1703, we'll move on to 1704, which is our animal waste storage ordinance. So unlike the previous one that was only, you know, cherry-picked different areas of the county, this ordinance applies to the entire geographical area of Eau Claire County. And basically the definition of an animal waste storage structure is a constructed embankment, excavated pit or dugout, or a fabricated structure that holds animal waste. There's no definition, or the definition doesn't include anything about the amount of waste or the length of time that it's stored. If there's a hole or a structure that holds manure, it's regulated under this. So there's kind of 3 different components to this ordinance. The first one would obviously be the design and construction of a brand new manure storage pit. These facilities would need to be in compliance with the NRCS 313 waste storage facility standard. That only applies to manure pits constructed after this ordinance was put into place. However, if there is an old manure pit that was, you know, constructed way back when, and the farmer decides to make it bigger, to make some changes to it, whatever it may be, at that point, when they're altering that old pit, it then needs to be brought into compliance with 313. That is a state standard that the NRCS revises from time to time. At one of our later meeting dates, we're going to be diving into what is actually included in 313. So the second part of our animal waste storage ordinance is going to be what you actually do with that manure once it's been put in the pit. At that point, we need a 590 nutrient management plan showing that that manure is going to be applied to a crop field, you know, using all the R's, right time, right place, right rate. And then the last portion of it talks about the proper abandonment and closure of a manure storage pit. Basically, if you have a pit that has been empty or not empty, but if it's been unused for 3 or more years, it's considered abandoned. At that point, it either needs to be brought up to code, back up to 313 if you want to reuse that pit again in the future, or it needs to be properly closed. There is an NRCS standard that outlines how to properly close a manure pit. Our ordinance does not directly reference that standard. It's an indirect reference. We can still enforce it, but it's not spelled out as clear as the other ones in there.
Right, our animal waste storage ordinance was developed many years ago, and the references to the NRCS standards such as 313, there's a reference in the ordinance that says to the most currently adopted version of the state rules. So as soon as the state rules change, Eau Claire County's changes with it. Some counties have adopted manure storage ordinances that reference a specific date of a standard, but ours actually references the most current version. So ours ordinance does keep up to date with the changes in technology and the standards as they come in through the state. They're adopted, in essence, immediately.
Do you know what year the original ordinance was passed?
I have been digging around from that, and I think it's back from the 1980s. Rod might be able to find it, but it was many years ago.
The first permit that we have in our office is from 98.
98.
Yes. So somewhere shortly before then is when this ordinance was originally put in place, and it would require, getting a permit from our office to either construct a new manure pit, alter an existing one, or close an abandoned one. Are there any other questions?
How many manure pits are out there that would come under this ordinance?
I could not give you a good number off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
We could dig into the record.
Well, and because you do have to do some compliance supervision, take a look at them, don't you? I mean, or is that not?
Yep. So
That's the DNR.
that's part of the permit process. Is once they dig the hole to put the pit in there, then we go out on site to make sure that the bottom's not in groundwater. It's good soil. They have a good liner in there. After the pit is in place,
Our ordinance was crafted more as a construction ordinance.
Mm-hmm.
That's why the portion in reference to closure of facilities is weekly referenced. And this is one of the things that we believe we need to address. The follow-up of monitoring of an existing structure is also weak within our ordinance, which is also something we would like to address.
A monitoring system where they have wells on around their building.
So that is
Yeah,
part of the
so
reason
that's-
we are looking at our
Yeah,
ordinance.
and that would be something, that would be a gap in our regulation.
that would be a good way of putting it. Any other questions about animal waste storage ordinance?
I guess I kind of got one, and it kind of goes overall, but can, like even for animal waste, can Eau Claire County be more restrictive than what state statutes?
I do not believe so unless there is scientific evidence.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So pretty much our hands are tied with what the state says.
Well, they're doing it up in Chicago County. They've got the wells. I mean, I think that's something we need to discuss, okay? And when we get to the point, I think it's already.
I'm going gonna wait until Greg. Okay. Okay, so now we're gonna move on to 1705. This is the erosion control ordinance. Again, this applies to all unincorporated areas of the county, whether or not they have zoning or not. This ordinance does apply to them, to those areas. What it regulates is any land disturbing activities that are 4,000 square feet in size or greater. There's a few other things that can trigger this ordinance that I have listed here. 400 cubic yards of fill or excavation, new utility channels, or we do have the authority if it's a site that does not meet these standards, but we believe that it can cause, undue harm to sensitive areas. We can also enforce this ordinance in those areas. Greg, I think the camera's off. I don't know if...
Oh, Mr. Eaton has joined us.
Okay, sounds good.
That's his camera.
Okay. So the point of having the erosion control ordinance is that whenever we have land disturbance in the county, we want to prevent erosion from leaving that site and, moving downstream or moving to your neighbor's site. So whenever there are large amounts of bare dirt exposed in the county, that's when this ordinance comes into place. One important thing to note is that it only concerns erosion during construction. Once the site has been properly vegetated afterwards and stabilized, this ordinance no longer applies. And then it also outlines best management practices that you can put in place to prevent erosion from leaving your construction site. Some of those would be like track out pads for dirt on the tires of construction equipment, silt fences, things like that. I think that's all I had on erosion control. The 4,000 square feet is the trigger. There is a small site and a large site. We really don't need to get into the difference between the two. Just the sense of it is that don't let erosion leave your property when you have it open for construction. And this could be, a new barn. It could be for a house. It's all encompassing within the county. Any questions about erosion control? All right, with that then, the last topic I'm going to cover is 1706. This is our stormwater management ordinance. What this ordinance looks at is when a construction project is going to be adding, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Again, this ordinance applies to all incorporated areas of the county. And it's when a half acre or more of impervious surface is added to the landscape. So if you have a construction project and you're adding, a roof, driveway, a concrete pad, something like that, and it's over a half acre in size, that's when this ordinance will be triggered. And this, instead of looking at soil erosion, this ordinance more looks at the water aspect. A lot of times when you're adding big impervious areas, you have concerns with flooding, which can, down the road cause erosion. And then the stormwater ordinance is different than erosion control in that it looks at not only controlling stormwater during construction, but also once construction is complete. That impervious surface is never going to go away. So how are you going to manage the stormwater from that property indefinitely? These are the specific performance standards that we look at on how you're specifically going to treat that stormwater from your site. It has to do with the amount of rain that you're expected to get, the size of the impervious surface, and then the infiltration rates of whatever material that you're using. A lot of times these end up being like stormwater retention ponds. So all of your water, all of your rough water will go into a pond, and then it's slowly released after the rain event, so that it's not just all going down, gushing at once and causing issues downstream. If anyone knows Liz Fagan from our office, her favorite phrase is keep the clean water clean. So what we're trying to do is, you know, rough water, driveway water, stuff like that. We don't want it going into areas that it doesn't need to be. So we're trying to control where, when, and how much that water leaves the site. That is all I have for Chapter 17. I just wanted to give you guys a really brief overview of the ordinances that we have in place and what things are covered underneath them. So if there are not any more questions, I think we can move on. Yeah.
Just real, in general, is the burden on the landowner under they actually think they deserve 4,000 square feet? That do people recognize that they should maybe check with the county? See a lot of that happening.
I mean, it definitely goes both ways. There's parts of the county that aren't as aware of these ordinances. A lot of the construction companies that work in the county are aware of these ordinances. So they definitely help us out. If it's someone, you know, putting up their own garage in their backyard, they may not be aware.
I've been on planning development here for county for 16 years, and I can only remember one case where a guy just didn't realize. And that happened to be in an unzoned township, which, you know, they don't have to come into the county for like permitting and things like that, which is also something that triggers all of it.
Right, so a lot of times if it is in a zone township and they come in for a land use permit, Jared or Ben, as they're reviewing the permit, they're going to ask if they have their erosion control permit. So for those towns that have county zoning, that's kind of a check and balance that we can use there. All right, Jared, you're up.